Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Jane the Virgin, Season 1, Episode 13, Chapter 13. In this episode, Michael is starting to put the pieces together, but it's a little bit too late. Meanwhile, Petra gets screwed, and not in the good way, and Jane has a really tough decision to make. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha, and as usual, I forgot to look up which of you lovely people has commissioned this episode beforehand. Lauren! It's Lauren this time, everybody. Thank you, Lauren. I don't know why I am so inconsistent with that. But yeah, Lauren, if you're here in the chat, hello and thanks. April and Rowan are here. Delightful. Thank you for coming. This episode, you guys, I just wasn't ready for how emotional I got over this. I was really struggling, you guys, a lot with this one. It was really tough. And I think that oh, Lauren is here. Hi, Lauren. I think that, and this is going to sound, this is the sort of thing that actual parents are probably going to be like, oh my God, she did not just say that. So I'm going to preface this by saying I acknowledge that as somebody who does not have children, I genuinely do not get it, in a real way. However, ever since taking custody of these puppies and being responsible for them, and there being such a different dynamic with dogs than there is with cats, and this feeling of real responsibility, and there's just so much more to training and raising dogs, and I was not ready for any of that. I feel like a lot more of a connection to storylines where people are feeling overwhelmed by children, because I just didn't have any sort of experience that could compare at all. And then all of a sudden, I was responsible for 8 tiny creatures who were entirely dependent on me and really sick. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I just had to make it up as I went along. And there was this constant sense of chaos and just a low-level panic that went on for months. And I'm still kind of not even entirely out of it, because I still have Sam to find a home for. Owen and I are still feeling kind of overwhelmed. It's certainly as manageable as it has ever been. It's more so but it's still not awesome. And so I think anytime now that there's a storyline centered around someone who feels scared and overwhelmed and they are out of their element and don't know what to do, and they're very conflicted, it just hits a place that's a very raw spot for me now. And it's so funny because last episode I was saying how Jane has become sort of one of the least interesting character, and then they did this and I felt so much for her. And I really think this actress just knocks it out of the park. She is so good at playing emotionally wrecked. It's just really, really believable. So I'm going to talk about her deal out of the gate, and everybody get ready, because I feel like I'm already on the verge of tears, and I am just feeling like it has nowhere to go but down. So we're going to have to get ourselves ready for that. But yeah, so Jane is, we have our flashback opening to her getting shots and having real difficulty with the pain of getting a shot. This is the sort of thing that you know, there's no like getting past this for a lot of people. Shots are just a kind of a freaky thing a little bit, you know, and like I can deal with them pretty well, but even so, it's not like I look forward to them. And there are times where they're worse than others. And they'll tell you up and down about certain things that there's like supposed to be no pain. And then they'll be just fucking liars. And this whole thing that she winds up getting done, it just looked so like that was a big needle, you guys. You know? So she is going in for her 3D scan, and she's going to be getting a lot of like pictures of the fetus and everything. And this is the sort of thing that like, if you've there's a lot of different methods they have now for giving images of fetuses, and there are some that are fucking horror movies. Like, it's the sort of thing that people share and they're very excited, and I can sympathize that they're excited, but also I'm like, what about this is cute and shareable? Like, this is so upsetting to look at. And there's one that's like got a very sort of red tone to it. And I saw this like meme where somebody had shared an image like that, very excited, and another person commented that they thought at first that it was a picture of lasagna, and I will be straight up, I also thought it was lasagna at first glance. This is just the kind of thing, like, it's sort of like a wedding. When you're having a kid, I'm not trying to say nobody gives a shit, okay? I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that nobody will ever care as much as you, and even your very close friends probably won't care as much. The only people that will care at anywhere near your level are maybe your parents and your grandparents. And that's an if. Maybe. Otherwise, it's never really going to matter to a lot of people in your life. And so you share these like images that mean a lot to you. And meanwhile, I'm like clicking unfollow because I can't handle it, because I find it disturbing. So, Rowan, I had to get used to giving myself shots since starting tea, and let me tell you, it was not very fun to start with. I almost passed out the first time. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've been having to give Owen shots, and I'm better at it, but it was a very difficult thing to like administer them. And I don't know about giving them to myself. Like, yeah, that sounds tough. Lauren says, people asked me with my first pregnancy if I wanted the 3D ultrasound, and I was like, oh my God, no, those are creepy. I don't know. I don't think that's exactly what Jane is doing. Hers is just the regular detailed ultrasound, usually called the anatomy scan. She says now we get to see it in 3D in the first scene. So I'm pretty sure she was intending to get the 3D. I don't know if she went through with it once they discovered this issue, but she specifically says 3D. So I think that was what she was going to do. But it doesn't matter ultimately, because what winds up happening is the nurse technician who is doing the scan is kind of, she does that thing where she is not hiding that something is wrong, and she is also not willing to give any information. And this is the sort of thing that I completely sympathize with the position that she's in. But the whole energy of the way she's handling this, I was like, this is just not the way to go. You have got to learn to mask better if you're not going to give people information, lady, because yikes. And before she even notices something is up, Jane and Raphael are talking about whether or not to find out the sex of the child. I will say I appreciated that it is called sex and not gender, although, you know, I'm not entirely sure the show is like doing that consciously, or if it's just what they decided, the wording they decided to use. But this is such an interesting issue now that I always like think about if I were going to have kids, how I would handle something like this. And, you know, it's all well and good to say that you are going to let the kid become who they are and not try and impose anything on them. But everything in society, and probably a lot of your family, are going to be really pushing gender shit onto you. And that must be really hard if you're trying to not play into that as a parent. And you also want to keep the peace with family and friends and stuff and not, you know, like, it's just the kind of thing that I'm glad I don't have to deal with and delve into, because that sounds very exhausting. But what Jane wants is to know the sex, and Jane is convinced the baby will be female because that is like what her whole family has ever had, is almost always females. But Raphael is kind of liking the idea of a surprise. And Jane is like me, where she really wants to be able to plan ahead. And so it's important to her to get this information because the planning is part of the fun for her. And that is also how I am. Now, what I find really interesting, and I would be super curious to have a study done about this. And I don't know how it would work. I'll say that. But I can't help but feel there is a really strong correlation between enjoying surprises and being rich. Because I feel like the people who are the most planning obsessed, the most conscious of having to research and everything, are the kind of people who cannot afford mistakes and cannot afford to wait till the last minute for things, because they can't just buy whatever. They can't just drop whatever is being asked. They have to find discounted versions of things. They have to find secondhand versions of things. And personally, planning my wedding, 80% of it was looking up designs of things that I liked and then finding a way to do it myself for less money. And it was the kind of thing that if I had been wealthy, I could have just paid for what I saw, and I could have done a lot of it at the last second because you just pay somebody else to do it. But it was so involved to do it myself. It had to be done way ahead of time. And this is also the thing with like going on trips. I have gotten the reputation of being somebody who like is an over planner, but I don't get to travel very much. And so I want to get my money's worth. Whenever I am able to travel, I want to see as much as I can. I want to do as much as I can. And it sometimes does translate to putting too much on my plate, and I wind up not enjoying it because I pushed it too hard. But I wouldn't push it that hard if I knew there was a possibility of coming back again and not needing it all to happen on the one trip, you know? So I feel like Raphael being like, well, let's just wait and then it'll be a surprise. That's a much easier thing to say when you're a dude with all the money you need and you don't have to worry about actually like taking care of a lot of it personally. And that's not to say I don't think that Raphael would be like, he would probably be the one to build the crib. I would say he would be, but it's the sort of thing like he would build the crib because like symbolically that's important. And then everything else he would pay somebody to build. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just seems like the kind of thing he would want to do, something that was like kind of a high profile project. And then he would be kind of done. So anyway, not that a crib is different if you're having a male or female, but whatever. Claire says, agree. Wealth plus not having to be responsible for all things at all times would make it much easier to enjoy surprises. Exactly. And that's a good point as well, Claire, is like feeling like you're kind of the one that's in charge of things. And this is something that speaks to me as, you know, a person. I am in a position right now, and I'm not going to get into it, but I am in a position right now where something has been kind of hidden from me. And finding out about it was sort of like accidental circumstances. And it is a problem that if I had been a little bit pushier, I would have uncovered sooner. But I wasn't, because I'm trying to restrain my control freak impulses. And then something like this happens, and I'm like, this is why I'm a control freak. Because my instinct was to push, and I didn't, because I didn't want to be like that. And then it turned out there was a good goddamn reason I should have asked many more questions, and I didn't. So I feel like I am put in the position of being responsible a lot of the time when I actively would like to not be, but frequently find that I am the only one who seems to give a shit. And that can be exhausting and really upsetting. And it's endless. And as much as Raphael can say, this is my kid, ultimately, we all know the buck stops with mom, and it always fucking has, and it always fucking will, because life isn't fair. And so as much as he wants to be involved and make the call on certain things, in the end, I don't care what he wants, because Jane is the only one that is actually going to matter ultimately. So it is just the kind of thing where, like, yeah, you can say that you want to not, overthink things, but that's probably because you have never had to actually be in control. You have always had people working for you who ultimately would be held responsible, and you would still be fine. You're not going to lose your job. Like, yeah, your dad was like, oh, you're fired. So you would have still been super rich. You would have been fine. Like, it's not actually, it was just an ego thing. Let's be perfectly honest. So it's just a tough thing where it's like, I have a hard time taking Raphael seriously in any real way, because until I find out more about him and maybe understand that, like, some other obstacles that he has faced that maybe I don't know about now, as of right now, he feels like somebody who has gotten really lucky and has never had to genuinely worry beyond getting cancer. And even then, you had access to like some of the best doctors in the world and top-notch medical care. So, Rowan says, as a fellow control freak, I sympathize very hard. I hate it when people let me down. It's really hard. It's really hard because as a control freak, when you grant somebody that trust, it's a hard thing to allow yourself to do. And to find out yet again that you shouldn't have taken your eye off the ball, that nobody else was like managing it. That sucks. It really does, you guys. It sucks. And I'm struggling a lot lately with like just a rage, because I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this position again. And it just keeps happening. I hate it when I make the extra effort to trust people and people let me down. Yep. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm bringing my own shit into this, but that's kind of what y'all pay me for, I guess. So it's fine. But so this lady notices that something is wrong and she does not control her face well at all. And finally, the doctor comes in and says, this is a bright spot on the baby's heart called an echogenic focus, or an echogenic focus. There's another one on the bowel. Let me be clear. By itself, this doesn't affect the baby's health at all. However, it can be a marker of a possible chromosomal abnormality in the fetus, which, for those who aren't aware, that can be something like Down syndrome, or I can't remember the name of the syndrome. Owen's sister had a chromosomal deficiency, and I can't remember what her condition was called, but his mother has the same thing. And this leads to him saying that there is something that you can do to find out whether it's going to be a problem or no. It's not something you can tell from the scan itself. We have to do an amniocentesis, and that is a needle into the uterus where we take some of the amniotic fluid, I'm assuming, or maybe blood from the baby, and check out what's going on. And that there is a high probability that this will be fine, but there is a small possibility that it could result in a miscarriage. And that only happens in 1 out of 300 procedures, but it is something that I have to be honest with you about. And he says that he's going to give them some time to think about it, discuss what they should do. And if they want to, they need to book it soon, because he gets a lot of appointments, and also he's going to be going away, which is something that winds up causing it to be like quite soon that she has it done. Now, this whole scene and Jane's like panic at this. Oh, you guys, look at me already. Oh. It's really like, I know comparing a human infant child to puppies is frowned upon, but you guys, I just can't tell you how hard it was. And I tried so hard. Over half of them died anyway. And I did everything I could. And it's so awful to be like completely out of control of the situation and helpless. And I just really felt for Jane. Like, she's just told this is happening to her. And if there's something wrong or not, there's no changing that part. The only thing is whether or not you can be ready, you know? And they're being like a living thing that is going to depend on you, and suddenly being faced with how unable to protect it you will be in many, many ways. You can do some things, but to a degree, a lot is left to fate and to chance. And, like, honestly, taking care of these puppies made me all the more certain that I cannot handle having children. I just couldn't do it. It's too much, man. It is too fucking much. These little guys almost broke me, and I don't know how you folks with children manage, because I would be a wreck every second of the day. Like, you know, talking already about how I'm a control freak, and you see these parents who are super strict with their kids, and I would be so tempted to turn into that, because you want them to be safe and okay. You want them to not make stupid mistakes that they have to make, because that's life. They have to make their dumbass mistakes. They have to choose stupid shit, because that's life. That's the whole thing. And you have to let go and let them do that. But no, it's not for me. So this scene, she's like really not sure what she's going to choose. And when she talks to her abuela and her mother about it, her abuela basically is like, look, getting the procedure is risky and will not change what's going on with the baby. So I think you shouldn't do it. Which is completely logical. You know, it is. Like, and I felt like her agreeing with her abuela is Jane trying very hard to be logical. But her mother says, all right, as long as you think you can let it go. And then we see Jane not able to let it go. And she does the worst possible thing. She gets on the internet. And look, there are times where the internet is actually helpful. You search something, you find out, oh, this is actually really common, and it goes away on its own. Or this is something that probably it's XYZ, which would make sense because I did such and such that day, so probably that is what did it. Little things, it can help, and it can show you, do these stretches and you'll feel better. Take this supplement, whatever. I'm not trying to discount the internet's worth. It's there for a reason, and it's super, super helpful sometimes. But that's for certain things. And then there's stuff like this. And she gets herself completely worked up. And we have her like on the bus the next day, and there's a baby that she's like waving to. And then she sees that like light spot as if it were in the scan on the baby's chest. It was really awful. Like, it was a small thing, but it really bummed me out. And finally, she goes to Raphael and she's like, I want to get it done. I want to get it done. And he completely understands. And I was very grateful that he doesn't argue. He doesn't try and use logic. He is basically like, you're the one who's dealing with all of this. Like, it's your decision and I'll do whatever you think. Good job, Raphael. And she has to schedule it during, it's like just a day before her graduation. And she has to be on 2 full days of bed rest afterwards. So she isn't going to be able to attend her graduation, which is just so devastating considering how hard she has worked and how much she's looking forward to all of this. And Raphael throws her a surprise bedroom graduation party. And you guys, this was the cutest thing in the world. I loved it so much. I really, really did. Like, it didn't, he kept talking to Zoe about like, I'm going to do it. Will you help? Blah, blah, blah. And she's like smiling, but she doesn't think that Jane's going to like it. I think Jane did like it, personally. I think she, you know, she said it was cheesy, and maybe it was, but it was also cute and sweet. They can be both. It's fine. But what it comes down to, this is something that I'm going to talk about very cautiously, because considering that we're talking about a chromosome deficiency, which can lead to a child with special needs, it is really easy to slide into creepy eugenics or ableism, and I don't want to do those things. However, I do want to address America doesn't have free healthcare. So, as much as the conversation with her mother, her mom asks, would you want to abort if there were an issue? And I could see people getting very up in arms about her even asking the question, but it is a valid question. The fact that Jane has Raphael as a resource means that she has many, many more options available to her than an average mother in the U.S. would. And I do not think that a child who has special needs is worth less than a child who doesn't. But it is a simple fact that if your kid has needs that go above and beyond average medical care, it is going to be much more expensive, much more high effort and involvement on your part to the point, depending on the situation, that you may not be able to work full time or at all if you have to take care of this kid. And that is something that I get very frustrated when people don't want to acknowledge, because we behave as if deciding that you don't want to have a child that has special needs is an inherently selfish thing, or it's not valuing the life of that child. That's not fair, because it's not like we provide what is necessary to families who have children of that situation. We make it as difficult as possible to access care. And we have so few laws protecting people. Like, it was recently up for debate whether or not, like, grocery stores and stuff that employed people with Down syndrome should be allowed to pay them below minimum wage. Like, just stop and think about that for a second. They were genuinely asking, hey, do you think you could write it into law that we're able to exploit our most vulnerable population even more? Actually, that'd be great if you let us pay them below minimum wage, because we consider them to be literally worth less. And this was a question, and in some states it is still not protected. So I want people to be honest about the way we provide care and resources. And I have a very close friend who has 2 autistic children, one of whom is completely nonverbal. And she is a single mother who cannot have a job. There is no job with a schedule that would work and would allow her to care for these kids. She depends entirely on Medicare and welfare and is barely getting by and is on the edge of losing her mind every fucking day, because she lives solely to keep these 2 kids alive, and there is nothing left for her after. She just doesn't have a life of her own in a lot of ways, because it is completely devoted to this care, and there are no supports or resources in place unless you pay for them, and she can't. So in a lot of ways, this question about whether to abort a kid that is going to be special needs, we act like it's a very offensive question that has a very simple answer. And what's offensive is actually our priorities as a country and our health care. What's offensive is that we have to ask this question this way at all, because we know we will be on our own. You know, like, my friend had a kid with spinal bifida. That kid came into the world already having cost $750,000 in medical expenses before he was even born. Now his parents are $1.5 million in debt caring for their child, who they chose to have, but it fucking cost them. This is not a decision to take lightly, and I get very, very angry when people behave as if choosing not to have a child with special needs is an inherently selfish decision. You have no guarantee of quality of life for that kid. You don't know what's going to happen to you, what's going to happen to your income, what you're going to be able to qualify for. It is all up in the air, and you are at the mercy of businesses that want to deny you care. You're going to be paying insurance towards a company that is going to do its best to not care for you. They're motivated, actively motivated to not help. And you are paying them money for that. What is this? What are we living? So I just really wanted to address that, because obviously I do not think Jane is going to consider aborting this kid if there is a problem. Like, you know, I of course she won't. I know her. But I don't want anybody out there who has faced this decision to feel shame if they have considered ending a pregnancy, because unless you are in a very particular position, it is not a guarantee that you're going to be okay. And considering how often people who are pro-choice talk about the, taking the value of the mother's life into account, that isn't something that we should just stop thinking about once the baby's born. What about the value of the mother's life once she's in a position where she has to spend 80% of her day, like, for the rest of her life, not until the kid is able to move out, but the rest of her life caring for somebody else and unable to live her own life, unable to do anything for herself that involves leaving the child unattended. That's asking a lot. And maybe some people consider that just part of the package. I don't think that's a simple question. So anyway, I'm sorry if that felt like it was sort of off topic, but I feel very strongly about it, having seen what some very close friends of mine have gone through, and the way they're made to feel shame for being resentful sometimes. And it's just, they are so far beyond what I would consider myself capable of, that seeing them feel shame when they do so much already, it's just fucking awful to me that that's even a factor on top of everything else, adding shame to it. Like, what? We don't need that. So backing things up, she gets the procedure, and the episode ends with her not having an answer as to how the results have come out. She has to wait to find out. But this whole thing it's just really painful, and it was really difficult to watch. And the one thing that I will say is that I appreciated how supportive Raphael was, and he's sleeping on a inflatable mattress next to her bed to care for her and everything. And all this leads to Shamara actually acknowledging that he seems to really care about Jane, which I appreciate that seems to be sinking in for her. Whether or not he's a great match for her, still up for debate. But I think he seems committed for now. This is the easy part, though, to be honest, Raphael. We'll see. So, okay. Let's back up. Let's really quickly talk about Petra. Because Petra is about to run away, so she thinks, with Lachlan. You guys, this is so hard, because now that Petra has found out that her mother was playing her, and I'm not trying to say that Petra is faultless, for God's sake, but she was being manipulated pretty handily. I have turned a corner on her, and she's still, her cheating with Zaz, that seems like it came from her just wanting to cheat. I don't know how much of that was because her mother told her to, I'm going to guess it wasn't. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. But she is in a state at this point that is very vulnerable. Milos is here bringing up all kinds of bad shit from being in this abusive relationship. It's never specifically said that he hit her, but I have to assume he had, because his temper is just completely out of control. And even if he didn't, he has that thing going on that men do where they make it clear they want to hit you, and they're not, and that you should be grateful that they're not. And this is something that I think a lot of women probably have encountered, whether it was from a partner or a father. But the vibe of violence is possible. And if you do not experience that violence, it is due to my own, like, restraint, and you do deserve it. But I am not going to punish you the way that I could punish you and the way that you should be punished. And this is a real thing with, like, dudes who punch holes in drywall, for instance. Men who throw things. Men who scream right in your face and they don't strike you, but they are an inch away, spitting in your face and calling you names. And that is really what I get off of him, is that if he wasn't hitting her, he was letting her know he damn well wanted to hit her. I mean, in the conversations they have in the hotel, he's in public and he has lost it more than once, slamming his fist down and screaming so that the entire room goes quiet and turns and looks at him. This is not the actions of a man who has control of himself. And she is, like, kind of mocking him a little bit to Lachlan, saying, oh, Milosh wants to talk again. And when she does speak with him, he is trying to get her to give him another chance, and is saying, I showed you that your mother was lying, and she was, like, you know, making stuff up to keep you away from me. And what she did was even worse than throwing acid, which is like, sir, what fucking planet do you live on? And again, considering your attitude here, maybe you weren't cheating, but Petra clearly doesn't, she's not safe with you. So I can't help but feel like Petra's mom knew Petra wasn't going to leave this guy for any of the very valid reasons from his behavior that were clear, like self-evident. And she was like, I guess I'm going to have to make up something that he's doing in order to push this along. And I don't really blame her very much if that was the case. Like, as a mother, if you're watching your kid be abused, even if it isn't, you know, turning physical, and you're trying to get them to see their own worth and leave, and they're not doing it, saying that you saw them with somebody else, I mean, that would feel like a valid move. I can understand it. And what Petra says is essentially, everything that has happened to me is because of fucking what you did and my fears around you and worrying that you would track me down and find me, that you were after me, and you ruined my life. And there is no chance that this is going to happen. And he gets really angry and does his thing. And she's just like looking at him like, yeah, see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So the whole scene, it's just really tough because he seems to really think that he is making an argument for himself here, and is shocked that since he has proven her mother is a liar, that she won't just turn her back on her mom. You know, he's just so disconnected from the reality of what he has done to Petra in the long term and how this has all, like, snowballed, I guess is really the word I want. He says, I love you. And there's a moment in the Sookie Stackhouse books that Miles and I haven't gotten to yet. And I won't go into details, but Miles doesn't like listen to these, I'm positive. Nevertheless, somebody tells Sookie, I love you. And Sookie says, those words are not like a magical formula. So what? You love me. And, like, that doesn't change anything about what has happened, what you have done, how I feel. So just saying it like that's going to suddenly fix things, that is simply not how it works. And when he says, why not? And she gives him that look, he kind of does have a moment where he like acknowledges with a sort of tilt of his head and an eyebrow, like, okay, yeah, I see it. And then he says, what about couples therapy? And I'm like, oh my God, dude, how about you therapy? How about you just go get therapy? Like, couples therapy. You're not a couple. What are you doing? Yeah, this was rough. Like, he's just. So then she says, I have moved on. And she's looking at Lachlan when she says it and says, goodbye, Milos, and gets up and walks away. And he is staring daggers at Lachlan. Well, Milos, you're about to get what you want. She gets her bags. She goes to meet Lachlan. And he tells her, you're not coming. And she laughs like, you're kidding, right? And he says, yeah, are you surprised that you've been outmaneuvered? And she says, I'm surprised you could be this awful. I'm awful? The way you left me for Raphael? And she says that was years ago. And I'm like, yeah, but you screwed him over quite recently again. Like, you know, she's thinking, oh, he cares so much about me that he's even willing to forgive those things. And I would respect him less if that were true, to be honest, as much as I like feel for her. And I do, actually, more than one would expect. A part of me is like, good for you, Lachlan. Getting a little bit of your own back. Like, it's a hugely douchey move. It really is. Like, it's very petty and small and not just, he's saying like, so I should get over it? Well, guess what? I'm over it. And I'm like, you're clearly not. You're absolutely not. However, it's very hard for me to be mad at him considering the way that she has been this whole time. And what I find really funny is that I was so confused about him bringing the yellow tulips because I thought it was him trying to hold on to her. And it didn't occur to me that he is attempting to scare her enough that she'll leave and not leave really, but like believe that she's going to be leaving with him. So it's it was just a kind of a simpler plan than I had thought. And it's interesting that as of right now, she doesn't know still that he was the one who left those tulips. I sort of thought if Lachlan fucked her over, it would come out in that moment, in that conversation, that he had done it. And it doesn't. So I wonder if she's going to mention the tulips to Milos and find out. But this whole thing, I wonder, because Lachlan is like, I want you out of the hotel. And we find out that Milos has bought like a 33% partnership. And he is going to keep her at the hotel. So what is Lachlan gonna do when he comes back after thinking that he has screwed her and that she is actually now potentially with the person who owns a third of it? I mean, he says that his family bought it and he had them buy it for you. You said I ruined your life and I need to make amends. And she's like, you're giving this to me, no strings attached. And he says, I didn't say there were no strings. We will own it together. So we will continue to be in each other's lives. What do you think? And when he says, what do you think? Her face, she's like, clearly, I don't really have any other options. But this is the worst idea. And I agree. It's sort of like, I genuinely don't see what else Petra's going to do. The only thing that I can think is that Petra is still young enough and still attractive enough that she could go out and hook another rich husband. That's about it. I don't know what kind of skills Petra has. She's a smart woman, but that doesn't mean she's getting hired for things. You know what I'm saying? She's drawing a paycheck from Raphael, but if Lachlan is in charge the way he is and he kicks her out, I don't know if she gets to keep that job. I don't know how that works. And Raphael sure fucking doesn't want her around. So I feel like if Lachlan doesn't want her and Raphael doesn't, they have perfect reasons to get rid of her. Lachlan was the one who wanted her to stay on in order to stick it to Raphael. That's the only reason she was even drawing a paycheck, was because he had like worked it out that way. So, you know, I don't know. So that's what's going on with Petra. Now let's start talking about Michael, who is interviewing Raphael, and he is like, I really don't see how your father has been involved with everything he has been, and you didn't know about any of it. And Raphael is like, yeah, see, here's the thing. I'm the one who got in contact with you about him meeting with that contractor. I'm the one who gave you access to his accounts and his emails and the letter from my sister about the corkscrew. And it turns out that Emilio was having an affair, and he was seeing this woman on his boat the night that supposedly Emilio was in his suite, and his assistant, who had been covering for him, comes out and finally tells the cops about where his boss really was. And I have to say, just as an aside, Emilio's assistant is hot. Like, can we please have him on the show more? Thank you. I really have such types, you guys. And a sort of like ruddy blonde dude, sort of vaguely Scottish looking, in a fucking like vest. This guy looks like a Hollywood version of Owen when I first met Owen. And it's just extremely predictable that I would be like, ooh, what's up? But yeah, they go and talk to his girlfriend and find out that indeed he was on the boat. Now, the thing is, Rose, who has not been aware Emilio was cheating on her, I am kind of like a little bit proud of Emilio for this. I'm not going to lie. Apparently he thought that Rose was having an affair, which we know she was actually, but that isn't what was going on for the most part. He was just sort of like, well, she's probably cheating and I'm cheating, so it's fine. And I'm sort of wondering if that's why he was being like, why are you acting so weird? He was sensing that maybe him coming home early, that he had like caught her or interrupted her plans or something, having an affair. I think that because he was like just so coy and weird with her. And I was like, what is this about if he isn't shady? And now knowing that he suspected her of cheating on him, I'm like, okay, actually, now I get it. But Rose has been telling the cops that as far as she knew, he was in the suite. That's what he told her. She had no reason to think he was lying, yada, yada. And the whole like conversation is very believable. Like, as far as my perspective, I'm still thinking this is a solid setup that she's got going on. And when they've talked to the girlfriend, she says Emilio called Rose and told her he was on the boat. He just let her think he was alone. And this is when the cops are like, wait, what? He told her he was on his boat? She's over here telling us she thought he was in his suite this whole time. But apparently she fucking knew he wasn't in his suite, and she's telling us that anyway. And all of a sudden, I loved this moment so much, you guys. Michael gets this look on his face and realizes. And it says, if a light bulb could go off in above Michael's head right now, it would have. And then the light actually goes on. And Nadine just says, sorry, it was kind of dark in here. That shit was so funny, you guys. It was so corny, but I laughed out loud. That was fucking funny. I think it's a combination of just like how well staged it is and how deadpan Nadine is with like delivering that line. That fucking cracked me up. So of course, him and Nadine both are on the exact same wavelength here. They say goodbye to the girlfriend, who I don't know if we have seen her around, but she didn't ring any bells for me. And he is looking through all of the files and is like, Rose had the same access to fucking everything as Emilio. And she's the one who designed all of the recovery suites. And we see the flashback, which I remember, to her bringing in that like, you know, foam board with all of the designs pinned to it for how they were going to do the recovery suites with like more blue, less green, whatever it was she said. And that was also Rosa's room that the corkscrew was in. And just all of this whole thing really coming together for them in a single moment. And I was very excited because I didn't think they were going to zero in on her anytime soon. I thought they would maybe start to pick up on her maybe in the next 5 episodes, and it wouldn't be until like the last 2 of the season we were going to have them go, wait a second, you know? But here it is. We're only on episode 13, and goddamn. So, and the whole thing with like setting up the contractor to come and like give him the money in just the spot that Raphael would see it, like all of that. And Sin Rostro wasn't saying Sin Rostro killed me. He was identifying her, which I really liked this because the bellboy is looking into her eyes when he says it. And even though, is that a tiny bit of a stretch? Okay, maybe, but I completely accept it. It's totally fine. So they have people go up, and of course, Rose is gone. And the room is empty, and Miles, I'm saying that because I was talking about not spoiling Miles. Michael looks like he is ready to like put his head through the wall. He is so fucking irritated. And they are watching the security footage later, and there is a truck that delivers linens. And they are usually a lot shorter than the one that is showing up on the screen. And all of them are pretty certain that this is the way that Rose made her escape, that she went down through like the back staff elevators and got into the back of this truck, maybe, I guess, and rode away. And they put an APB out on the license plate. But that is about all they can do. And so this causes Nadine to have to go back and look at the footage of the night that Zazo was killed. And they're assuming, okay, Nadine killed him. But when they look at the footage, Nadine is right there. Or not Nadine killed him. Rose killed him. Sorry, everybody. But Rose is right there. Her husband is right there. Then they're thinking, okay, so it was the bellboy who did it. No, the bellboy is right off there in the corner. So it couldn't have been him. And so they're sitting there like, well, okay, then who killed the fucking dude then? And then we jump to a scene. And I couldn't tell you guys. So the scene is Raphael comes up to Zazo and says, hey, did everything go okay? And Zazo says, yeah, great. And they shake hands. And the narrator says, next question? Was that a flashback? Or are we suggesting Zazo isn't dead at all? That was a flashback, right? I have to assume. Here's the thing. Why would Raphael kill him? We know Raphael wasn't aware this dude was fucking his wife until after he was dead. Unless he's a great actor and he actually knew. I don't buy it, though. I don't think he knew. So, yeah, Rowan's saying, I mean, he died pretty publicly and definitively. But that's, in a telenovela, that doesn't matter. There's always, like, a way that they managed to make it look like somebody died and they did. Like, I will always be willing to accept, oh, they aren't actually dead, if they explain it away a little bit. Will there be holes in it that I'll be like, I don't know about this? Sure. But, like, I'm so used to so many shows doing psych, he wasn't really dead, that it wouldn't faze me at all, to be honest. So I'm assuming that this is a flashback, but the thing is, the narrator says next question, like, obviously this moment where they shake hands means that Raphael killed him, and I'm just not buying that. I just don't see it. Like, Raphael, I'm not saying he's not capable of murder, because frankly, I think pretty much everybody is capable of murder. There are a very few folks that I think couldn't do it. Mostly, I pretty much believe anybody could, if the circumstances are correct. But I don't understand the motive. Because if it's just, hey, you were fucking my wife, killing him doesn't feel like the way Raphael would play it. You know? And him just being here and being like, how'd it go? And shaking his hand. How did what go? Like, is he talking about the setup for the event that evening? I don't feel like that's what he would be asking. I mean, why down here? Why are you meeting where you are? There's something about this whole thing that isn't adding up to Raphael killed Zaz. I just don't see it. So, yeah, exactly. Rowan is saying, and remember they were besties. So, unless, like, it's either it was a total accident, and yes, Raphael did something that led to his death, but he didn't intend it, or I'm being played by the narrator right now, and Raphael is just there, but didn't actually have anything to do with it. And that's what I'm going to go with. So, what I would still like is Petra did it. I don't think Petra did it because, if I recall, she was down amongst the people when he falls. I may be wrong about that. But either Petra did it, her mother could have done it. I could see that. Especially if Petra shared with her mother the way Zaz grabbed her by the throat. Because if nothing else, her mom is protective of her. So, I don't know. In the end, though, I'm not mad Zaz got. Like, he seemed to suck a little bit, so it's fine. But yeah, I'm very excited to watch the next one. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you again, Lauren, for commissioning this. And Lauren's saying earlier, I'm sorry, I missed it. I think this comparison is totally valid. The puppies were so dependent on you and your help. Thank you. I know, I feel so self-conscious making that comparison, but I can't help that it resonates for that reason. I just can't help that. That's how I feel, you know? So, all right. Thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate you all a lot. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Unspoiled Network podcast.